This episode of the podcast is brought to you by the Urban Lounge, located at 241 South, 500 East, right in downtown Salt Lake City. Head on over to their website, theurbanloungeslc.com, connect with them on Twitter and Facebook, and find out about all of the upcoming shows.
Showcasing local talent, professionals, and everyday people making Salt Lake City what it is today. It's time for another episode of the I Am Salt Lake podcast.
Thank you so much, everybody, for checking out the I Am Salt Lake podcast. This is episode 123. My name is Chris Hollifield. I am your host. Welcome to my show. Welcome to the podcast all about Salt Lake City. IamSaltLake.com is the website. You can head on over there, check out all the previous episodes. Links for iTunes, Stitcher Radio, Mediocre Radio Network is all right there on the website. This episode, I sat down with Jesse Brake. He's part of Geeks Who Drink. He's a quizmaster for them here in Salt Lake City. He's also an announcer for roller derby. Sat down, he came over to my apartment, found out his story and all the cool things that he's up to here in Salt Lake City. You know, I have a great time chatting with everybody, and I appreciate the support. I appreciate the feedback. I appreciate the emails. I'm here once a week with a brand new episode. I will be here through the holidays, through Christmas and New Year's, so you're going to want to make sure to subscribe in iTunes. That way you don't miss a single episode along the way. Again, thank you for the support. Why don't you guys join me now as I talk to Jesse Brake as he came over to my apartment here in downtown Salt Lake City. Even for my sake, so I know all the things that you're involved in case, I mean, you probably do all kinds of things. Why don't you just kind of introduce yourself and what you do for the people listening, in case they're not familiar with you at all.
Well, my name's Jesse Brake, and I do pretty much everything around town that I shouldn't be able to make a living at, which I barely do. And most of that involves running pub quizzes 3 nights a week, as well as announcing roller derby whenever I can. Beyond that, anything else I do is typically derived from that. Either it's public appearances, speaking, occasionally I do DJing, but I'm not an actual DJ. The best I can do is hit play on an iPod.
Like where it would like DJ at like a dance club or something like that?
Well, sometimes for after parties, for roller derby, but also part of Geeks Who Drink and the pub quiz is designing playlists as well as a little bit of improvisational, sometimes insult comedy, depending on the hecklers. So, those are the main parts that entail pub quiz, besides the writing it, the selling it, and the hosting of it.
So how long have you even been involved with Geeks Who Drink?
Well,
how long have you been doing that for?
Sorry about that. As far as Geeks Who Drink's concerned, I've been with them for a little bit over 3 years, probably approaching 3 years, 30 weeks based on my weird nerd memory. So the way I got involved with them is actually I was working at Blockbuster back when that was still a thing and not a place where you buy meth. My ex, who I adored at the time, would play those stupid damn Facebook games like Farmville and would be like, sign on your Facebook and send me things to Farmville. And I would do it.
So she was begging you to play Farmville and you were like, good God, leave me alone, woman.
Yeah, it was.
I don't want to play Farmville. Were you any good at it? I mean, how do you get...
I signed into Farmville. And the reason why I did it is because I saw people were doing 8-bit graphics in their farms. So I made a giant Boo Ghost from Super Mario as my farm and took a screenshot of it and then immediately deleted it. That was it. That was the extent of my Farmville experience. But she would want me to sign in and go water her plants or something like that, which is not a euphemism.
Why, she was out of town or something?
Yeah, exactly. And while doing that, there was a Facebook ad on the side that talked about joining up for something called Geeks Who Drink. And I said, well, both of those things pretty much describes my life. So I'd click on it. And the job application honestly felt a little sketchy because it was about 6 questions. And the questions were along the lines of, do you have any relevant experience? And are you more geek or drink? At which point I put down, well, I know what a pan-galactic gargle blaster is, which I found out later is not a very original response. But a few months later, I got a call back, and it was actually the same weekend as the Biggest Loser tryouts in Salt Lake City, which was funny because I had a choice. Literally, the Geeks Who Drink tryouts and the Biggest Loser tryouts were at the same time. And I was like, well, surely there's not that many fat people in Salt Lake, which I was proven wrong when I went by that. Because, see, at that time, I was close to 500 pounds.
Good grief! You lost a lot of weight.
I lost a little bit.
What was your secret?
Poverty and sex, mostly. Lots of really risky, unprotected sex, courtesy of Plenty of Fish and OkCupid.
Well, thank you, OkCupid, and Plenty of Fish, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Special no thanks to FetLife, because the only thing I got out of that was a couple of permanent scars.
Yeah, well, congratulations for that.
But went over to Piper Down, which is where the tryouts were. And what sucked was at the time, I wasn't really a roller derby announcer. I was just really into it. And all of the local roller derby announcers who were big shit on campus were there. And I was like, oh man, I got to go up against these guys. They already have the job I want. This is going to be terrible. And then they got up there and they were mediocre. Jejunely, I guess would be the fancy word to use. And I went up there and did a couple of really lame jokes and read questions, and I got a call back.
And where was this at? What?
Piper Down.
Piper Down.
Which is actually...
Is that where you're at now?
We are actually still at Piper Down. It was the first venue that picked us up. David Morris, who's the owner. If every club ran it how he did, Geeks Who Drink would be a success everywhere. And I'm not saying that to fillet David Morris via podcast. I'm saying that because the guy was very smart, took out a lot of ad space, and invested in Geeks Who Drink. And because of that, they probably do more money on a Wednesday than they do a Saturday.
At Piper Down.
Exactly. And that's when we run Geeks Who Drink there. It's a Wednesday and Sunday.
Wednesday and Sunday at Piper Down. And now it's at other locations, though, in the Salt Lake area, or no?
Yes, there's a ton of other locations. I do Monday nights at Devil's Daughter at 8 p.m. I do a bar named Sue at State. On Tuesday, I have other people who do a bar named Sue Highland and Hookah as well on the same Tuesday night. Also, Gracie's, I believe, does it Tuesday. Wednesday, I'm at Willie's Lounge for a faster and more low-key pub quiz. It's a lot less people than Piper Down. So a lot of people were intimidated to go to Piper because it is a ton of people. It's 180 plus there Wednesday night.
Do you know Nick Johnson?
Yeah, Nick Johnson. Me and him were hired at the same time.
Does he still do stuff with Geeks Who Drink or no?
Yeah, he does a lot of stuff with Geeks Who Drink, which is part of the craziness. Where does
he's just an old friend, you know?
Yeah.
Through the interwebs, we know.
Yeah, he did the What Would Jesus Do in Salt Lake?
Yeah. It's I'm just kind of curious, you know, because he is he a quizmaster too, or no?
Absolutely. Yeah. So what happened was to get back to that.
Yeah. Sorry.
No, you're
kind of veering all over the place here.
No. That's with me. Is that if you don't stop me, I will segue into things.
No, that's the beauty of podcasting, man. Yeah. It's we're just a couple dudes hanging out, man.
Well, back at the original Piper Down interviews, Nick Johnson and myself were both chosen as the two main people that they wanted in Salt Lake. And Nick Johnson got the call to host Piper Down first, which I'm totally not still bitter about 3 years later, asshole. But he was the host and I was his scorekeeper. And
he'll listen to this.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And he totally knows how I feel about it. My first job away from scorekeeping for him at Piper Down was hosting a bar named Sue on Highland. And from there, it just kind of exploded. What a lot of people don't understand, and one of the main criticisms I hear sometimes about Geeks Who Drink is they call us corporate. And that's not the case at all, because a lot of what happens in Geeks Who Drink is influenced by people like Nick and myself.
But it is a United States-wide
Exactly. We're from Alaska to New York.
Okay.
And we've got teams traveling to play in our national competition all the way from Canada.
Wow.
We've actually have a writer who's in Cambodia right now, too. So, I mean, we have a team of people that work with us, but it's still very much a company that only has 2 handfuls worth of corporate figures. Nick travels and does a lot of sales and
for Geeks
Who Drink absolutely all over the country, because he helped sell a lot of bars here in Utah. And myself, I've had a number of different roles in the company. Some I've sucked at, but I've always tried to do more. And my main thing is hosting, training, and writing. I love writing questions and trying to push the envelope sometimes in a term of content and what we can squeeze content out of. And that's why a lot of it, when people say it's corporate, it's just not the case. There's a lot of local people working on this. And just because of the fact that my editor lives in the Hoosier state does not mean that I'm not writing a lot of the questions that you're playing that night, or that Nick is not the one pushing sales in this area either.
Yeah. So you do write a lot of the questions in?
You know, that would be unfair to say, because we have a team of a lot of talented writers. And while I do write, I don't write as much as I should, just partially because I was working on a lot of other avenues for the company at that time. I was also working on recruiting other QMs in other states, and I stepped away from that. And I even handled small claims for a very short time. And
small claims as what now?
Well, some bar owners are from a different planet and believe that because they got a crystal reading that says that there's negative energy between our two companies that they can break a contract early, and that's just not the case. And that is a true to life event that actually happened. So sometimes whenever people break contracts or don't live up to their deal, we take them to small claims court.
Wow.
Yeah.
Don't mess with Geeks Who Drink.
Well, not to scare any bar owners. That's not a threat. That's not what it is. But anyone who does business knows you have to live up to a contract. And the fact is that I work my ass off doing this. And when you break contract randomly, that's not only money out of, Geeks Who Drink pockets, but my pocket, everyone who wrote content for that quiz to be hosted that night, the people who are working on supplies from paper to pencils to coasters. I mean, a lot of people lose money every time someone tries to cancel a contract early and doesn't allow us to recoup costs at that point.
So you mentioned Piper Down. That's remind me again what night you're there. Wednesday night, you said?
Wednesday nights in Piper Down and Sunday nights.
So let's say, for example, somebody listening, or even myself, I've never been to one of your events. I would come down Wednesday at what time?
Well, Wednesday gets started at 7:30, but you want to be there, I would say, by 6:30.
By 6:30.
And that's to get a decent spot in the bar. Not that there's not that there's undecent spots, I should say, in the bar. But, it's very busy Wednesday night. It is the busiest pub quiz, in the state, bar none. At that point.
Okay. So I'd get there about 6:30. Can I go by myself? Do I need to have friends as a team?
You can have up to 6 people on a team, not more than 6. You'll have to split up and meet people the way you did before AshleyMadison.com.
Okay. So it is, you wouldn't recommend a single person to go down there?
Well, I mean, if you're that guy from Aqua Teen Hunger Force whose name is escaping me.
Think about it. What if you just moved to Salt Lake and you're just looking to meet some locals, right? I mean,
Absolutely.
I'm sure people could get hooked up on a team, right?
Not only that, but like I was slagging FetLife earlier. I mean, it was a joke, but actually my Monday night quiz over at Devil's Daughter, I had a massive poly group that came out there that would always meet up as like a date night. And I've seen a lot of people bring a lot of different dates to pub quiz.
You're like, oh, he's got a new one this time.
Well, yeah. And I mean, there's a running joke about that sometimes, but, no, I would definitely say pub quiz is probably one of the best first dates that I've seen and that I've actually used myself. Because one, it facilitates conversation. Two,
but what if you just suck at like the answers and then you just look like an idiot in front of your date? Man.
Well, I think it's more important to have fun.
Well,
and
true.
If you can both be bad together, that works out, or you can be impressed by someone's intelligence. And it's, once again, it depends on how you handle yourself socially. But, I think pub quiz is an excellent social event.
Okay.
Which is,
well, no, I mean, I've been to, pub quizzes and they're fun. They're a blast. They're, a great reason to go to the bar and get some drinks and hang out with people and meet new friends, So anyways, you get there about 6:30, you start about 7:30.
Yeah.
And how long, how late do you guys go?
We go about 2 hours.
About 2 hours.
Because we know that people want to, get home and go do stuff. Piper Down typically finishes about 10 o'clock, and that's only because of the sheer amount of people that are there. But any other pub quiz night of the week, we always set ourselves strictly to about 2 hours. But David specifically wants us to end closer to 10 on Wednesday because we have karaoke following right at 10.
Do you guys host a karaoke?
No. I believe it's...
David from Piper Down.
Yeah. I want to say it's Entourage, but if that's not the case anymore,
They do most of the karaoke's here in Salt Lake. Yeah. Does it cost anything for people to play at all?
No, there's no cost to the pub quiz, which is what sets us apart from some of the other ones. And at Piper, first place gets $50 bar tab, and second place gets $25 bar tab.
That's nice.
Yeah, it's pretty nice, especially considering how much I enjoy Piper Down's food. But
what's your, I mean, that's a typical question I ask people, some of their favorite places to eat, but since we're on Piper Down, what is some of your favorite food from Piper Down specifically?
From Piper Down, I really like their visualized grilled cheese. It's one of the better grilled cheese sandwiches I've had here. Not that you find many places that serve them, but their visualized grilled cheese is excellent. Also, there was a Bloody Mary chicken sandwich that David was working on.
Ooh, that sounds delicious.
Yeah, and I've had like Bloody Mary linguine before. That's kind of like a hangover cure the next day. But the Bloody Mary chicken sandwich that he was talking about, he was looking for names. So I was like, you got to call it the Poultrygeist because Bloody Mary, ghost, and chicken, which I thought was clever, but no one else did. So I don't know if he called it that or not.
Huh, I'll have to. I don't make it to Piper Down as much as I mean, they're a little further south than I specifically live, but I do like to make it over there. I have an old friend that actually bartends at Piper Down, Jared. Mm-hmm. I don't know if you know Jared over there. Old friend, so it's nice to visit him from time to time. But anyway, so I mean, what's your personal all-time favorite thing with being a quizmaster with Geeks Who Drink?
Honestly, a big part of it, besides the getting recognized in public, which has happened a couple of times, which is
it's fun.
That's fun.
Getting the ladies, right? I mean, you got to be screaming with the ladies being a quizmaster.
I'm not going to talk about the insatiable pub quiz groupies that there are, but they do exist.
You probably go home with a new lady every night.
I think the current lady, I think the current lady friend would have objections to that, but if she doesn't, she needed to make that known sooner. So. As far as being a quizmaster, honestly, one of my favorite things is writing around and then seeing people react to it. Last weekend, we did something called Don't Blink. It was an all Doctor Who quiz. And I wrote around 7 called The Oncoming Storm. And when we looked at the quiz as a whole, myself and the theme quiz editor, Jason Hart, we determined that round didn't institute a difficulty curve in the quiz. It was more like a difficulty right angle. So the quiz kind of went along and then it hit that round and it was just soul crushing. And it was really fun to see all this room of Doctor Who addicts working their hardest on this round, and some of them issuing death threats to me on the answer sheets, and some of them just struggling with it, like, oh, I saw that one episode, but I just can't remember it. And a lot of them said it was their favorite round. So
now, what if, like me personally, I'm not big into Doctor Who. Mm-hmm. I mean, wouldn't want to come to a night like that, or what?
Well, honestly, we had some people that weren't big into Doctor Who either, but they still came out because it was a lot of fun. We had people in costumes. We had tons of prizes.
Well, I mean, yeah, like what if you're just not a geeky person that knows a lot of that trivia? I mean, I guess it helps to come to, I mean, if you're going to come to a Geeks Who Drink, then you better be a geeky person, or not?
Well, that's the big difference between our pub quiz and other pub quizzes, is that you don't need to mouth breathe to come to Geeks Who Drink.
Okay.
Because we don't believe that geeks have to subscribe to a certain element of geek culture. You don't have to, know the Marvel Universe inside and out. You don't have to have leveled 4 characters to 60 in Vanilla WoW. You can be a geek about many different aspects, and we have the questions that cover all topics.
Okay.
Like I said, it's not basement dwellers who drink. It's geeks who drink. We have sports geeks, music geeks. I've done rounds. I did a round once called Seattle Needs a Stick-Up-the-Assectomy, and it was a round on Seattle and colorectal surgery. So how do you make that round appealing pop culture-wise? Have questions about, like, what president had polyps removed from his saintly colon, Ronald Reagan, or the fact that if you were to shove the Seattle Space Needle up a hipster barista's ass, what birth defect would you be rectifying in porphyrinanus? Now, does all
sounds fantastic.
Yeah, and it's very sardonic. The quiz, despite the fact that we have multiple writers, our editor, Christopher Short, does an excellent job at giving it one voice. We have probably anywhere from 15 to 20 main writers and an editorial staff behind us. Some of them Jeopardy champion winners who wants to be a millionaire winner. Some of them with degrees in, literature. And myself, who has an 8th grade education, who went to Slick one semester to study critical theory so I could say words like deconstructionism and sound smart. So
you did just sound very smart.
I know.
Blew me away.
Hey, thank you, Derrida. So we have a lot of different knowledge bases that come to the quiz, and we work on one sardonic voice to portray it all. And it doesn't matter what you're a geek about. one of us has written about it.
Do you think like being a geek and kind of the whole nerdy, geeky thing, I mean, it's kind of becoming a trendy.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Like, what are your thoughts on that?
I'm really glad you asked that question because there's a problem with geek chic right now. And the problem is the geeks themselves. Like,
oh, I'm a nerd. Oh,
yeah, well,
you know.
Well, the thing is that there's a couple of different elements to it. There are the geeks who were geeks in high school that went unfucked. I'm sorry if that's bad for the podcast.
No, all right. Language isn't a problem here.
All right.
Man. We're
so anyway,
you know.
They went unfucked. They went, they weren't popular. They got picked on, you know, they were playing Dungeons and Dragons rather than getting.
I'm talking, real nerds.
Exactly.
Man. These were the real
That's
geeks.
a bullshit term though. What the nerd is an epitonic term. It covers a wide spectrum and not just autism spectrum, which is what you're referring to right there by saying real nerds, basement dwellers, people who have no social skills.
No, I don't even mean it in a bad way.
Yeah,
but the people that they truly loved playing Dungeons and Dragons.
I play Dungeons and Dragons every week.
But what I'm saying is you know what I'm trying to say here, where it's the people that are they're shopping the hot topics, they're shopping. You know what I mean? They're this is cool now.
Yeah, but here's the issue. And what I meant to get to before I started rambling, was too many people who consider themselves quote unquote geeks are persecuting individuals that they don't consider to be true geeks. Like that faux geek girl crap that's going on right now, where you're too pretty to be a geek. That's complete BS. I have plenty of female friends. My girlfriend's gorgeous, and I don't just say that because I'm dating her and because I'm vain. She is, and she out-geeks me a lot. And I know plenty of people from Pub Quiz, from Derby, from everything else that are heavy geeks. One of my Derby girls that I wish I got the call for more, her name's Harry Slaughter, but she hosted a panel over at the Anime Bonsai, her and her husband, Fragglepuss, who's a local roller derby announcer. And they're both gorgeous individuals, and I would love to get in on that menage a trois right there. But they still have the same issues, where Harry Slaughter is sometimes accused of being not a real geek girl because she's so good looking. And that's the type of BS that needs to stop. There was an image that was shared virally for a long time that showed a woman who was in a Dent outfit, Drusilla Dent, I believe the character's name was. But it says, gender swapped, Joker, steampunk, and a Willy Wonka hat. Congratulations, you made trying too hard in art form. Well, the guy who wrote that didn't know that this was another character, an obscure character from a comic book, and was basically slut-shaming her and fake geek girl labeling her when he didn't even know the character that she was portraying, which, if I was to describe that character to you, would look exactly how he described it. But that is one of the BS aspects. And the second aspect of these elitist geeks are the ones that are still bitter about getting beaten up in high school, still bitter about not getting laid, and not realizing that because they could figure out THACO was not the reason why they didn't get laid. They didn't get laid because they were black holes of need that had, severe social issues and were just not fun to be around. They're pedantic and trite with their conversations, and they're a blight spinning in the middle of infinite cosmic ordinary. And if they actually had something interesting to say, and if they had a way to convey their love and their hobby in a fashion that made them attractive and had some confidence, besides the fact that their level 20 paladin could totally smite a Baylor and kill it in one shot, then maybe they wouldn't go unfucked. And maybe they wouldn't still be bitter at individuals. So what you see right now at the height of this geek chic craze is people that are still angry about it and still don't know how to interact with the world. And because of that, it's giving individuals who are well socially adjusted a bad name.
A lot of words that went over my head. I'm not, you know what I mean? I'm not the geeky person to really,
And that's the thing. It's like I was in high school. I went to high school in South Carolina, which, because of the fact that I'm Native American in combat boots, wearing a death metal shirt and playing Dungeons and Dragons, I was not popular at all, but I didn't care. I was doing live music, I was playing D&D, I was skipping school, and I was a massive geek, and I loved every bit of it.
And you were getting laid.
I was.
Yeah.
And that's not me trying to relive the glory days by saying that. It's because I wasn't a dick about it. and I wasn't socially awkward about it. And that's what a lot of people don't understand, is that the aspects of liking D&D has never cock-blocked anyone. There are, of course, always going to be people that are like, ooh, D&D, isn't that what nerds do? Or, don't you live in your mom's basement? But all that is no more of an identifying factor of someone not being worth a shit than someone saying Juggalo is my religious preference. I mean, I wouldn't want to sleep with that person either. So I'm just saying it's like when the pretty girl has tattoos all over her and they're like, why'd you get all those tattoos all over you? You were pretty to begin with. And it's like, fuck you. That's not, I don't exist to be your definition of gorgeous, or I don't exist to be your definition of cool. Every Sunday for the last 14 years, I have ran a tabletop game, whether it's Pathfinder, D&D, Call of Cthulhu, Rifts, Mutants and Masterminds. I can go on and on. I've got about $5,000 worth of RPG books and about half that in figurines. And that has never been a detriment to my social life. And in fact, it's only enhanced it by the fact that I always have a group of friends that get up to do it.
What are your thoughts on like Hollywood cashing in on like a lot of these, newer movies coming out, going on for years, I guess, really. But a lot of these comic books and geeky movies are kind of mainstream.
I love it personally.
Yeah.
Because, I've always had the ability to have the imagination in my head when reading, especially when playing tabletop games. But I do love these stories getting their treatments when they're handled with respect, unlike what Schumacher did with, Batman Forever and stuff like that. But you have people like Nolan coming along and doing the Batman Begins, his Dark Knight trilogy, which was excellent, I thought. Third one could have been handled better, but we're not going to get into that. So, but I'm really looking forward to Guardians of the Galaxy and the Age of Ultron and Captain America.
It's kind of nice to see him on the big screen.
Yeah.
And be able to go and watch it. There wasn't movies like that back in the 80s, really.
Well, it's weird you say that. And if you go back and look at the 80s and read like the comic magazines at the time, people talk about, what they wanted to see. And they talked about like, a darker, grim Batman to counteract the Adam West style. And people were like, man, I don't know if that can ever really be done. And then Tim Burton comes out. And, this was obviously a little bit past the early 80s when he did Batman. Mm-hmm. But that came out, and while we look back at it now and it looks a little campy, that was amazingly dark in comparison to Adam West Batman. And so we even had films like that were super dark back then. Even for as terrible as it was, Dolph Lundgren's Punisher was super dark at the time too, in comparison to, say, David Hasselhoff's, Nick Fury, Agent of S.H.I.E.L.D. So
they were there.
Yeah, they were there in a modicum, but that starts getting into like the whole golden age of comics or the iron age of comics, and where things started to get darker. So I think as people matured and started respecting comics as an art form, they've been able to tell more adult stories. And because of that, that's why comic books and graphic novels are starting to become the printing press for Hollywood, where novels were before.
Do you think that will eventually die off? Or do you think it's because the kids that were into that are now in their 30s and 40s, or late 20s? There's just a larger, I don't know how old you are.
I'm 28.
28. Yeah. So, but do you think that whole geeky thing will eventually die off?
I honestly don't think it will.
Or do you think it'll get bigger and bigger?
It's hard to determine how far this can go.
Yeah.
Because like in recent news, they announced that AMC has picked up a pilot of Preacher. Now, if you had told me 5 years ago that Preacher was going to come to a cable channel,
you would have said,
no way.
Hell no.
No way. You have a character in it named Arseface who tried to commit suicide, like Kurt Cobain style, and failed, had a huge gunshot wound in his head, and still was a pop star. This is a story about a preacher who wants to fight God. And there was just no way that I could ever fathom seeing that on the big screen, let alone the silver screen. And now that's becoming a reality.
Yeah.
I think, honestly, that I don't see any stop for it.
Which is fine. I mean, it's great. I mean, it's, what do you think about a lot of like even remakes of some of these older movies? I mean, not even so much geeky movies, but just, I mean, since we're talking about movies and stuff like that, but how they've remade a lot of these older, I mean, even how they remade A-Team, you know, or something like that, you know, it's like some of that stuff, let it kind of be in my personal opinion. I don't know what your opinion is.
Well, for me personally, I think Hollywood
is running out of ideas.
Well, I just think they have a fascination with necrophilia because, and I can sum that up with one sentence. They have announced a sequel to It's a Wonderful Life.
Have they really?
Yes.
See, and that's just a classic, man. You leave that alone.
Yeah. I cannot think of anything more unnecessary than maybe a sequel to Schindler's List or The Color Purple. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I just can't imagine anything that I would require less than a sequel to It's a Wonderful Life, which means that there's always going to be individuals with a ton of money that don't know what they're doing with it, who don't understand target demographics anymore. There's always going to be people like Mr. Popper's Penguins when it came out with Jim Carrey. I remember reading that as a kid. I guarantee you if that came out 10 years ago, it would have been a major hit. But now kids are more focused into like Harry Potter, you know, and other things like the Marvel universe. So it wasn't that big of a hit when it came out. I mean, it was with very small children, but it wasn't as big as it could have been if it had been released earlier. Demographics will change as time goes on, as people become more mature and what they're willing to let have their boundaries pushed to. I mean, it's the same thing with me coming here to Utah from South Carolina.
Yeah, what brought you to Utah, man? What?
Well, honestly, I had lost my job in South Carolina. I worked at a radio station called WYBB, and at that time it was known as 98X, and we were kind of like the extreme, you know, alternative music channel. And
you got the voice for it.
No, don't even acknowledge the voice. That was bad. But the issue was a friend of mine, Brian Kirkland, had a show called Bam Nation Unleashed, and he got the station to agree that once per hour he could play like death metal, which something that I believe Maximum Distortion's the name of the show here.
Okay.
That does that at their safe harbor hour. They play a small segment of death metal here. Well, we got death metal to be played during late afternoon, and I started calling in and harassing Bam and harassing him constantly. And eventually he started to dread my phone calls because he would play like Slayer's Jihad, which is off their Christ Illusion, one of their newer albums. And I'd call in and be like, "Oh, Bam, well, how long has Slayer been a band?" And he's like, "Oh, like 20 some odd years." I'm like, "Then why do you keep playing the same fucking song?" And just yelling at him and stuff like that. And eventually he's like, "Listen, if you think you know better, you should come in and do it." And I said, "All right, I'll totally do it," and took him up on it.
And this was in South Carolina.
In South Carolina,
yeah.
absolutely. So I started with a radio segment called You Failed at Life with Jesse Brake. And I would do album reviews that would be scathing. Just the most vitriolic things that I could think of, just tearing apart these albums. And eventually it led to a show called Critical Mass, where I would play a song that I thought was awesome and heavy or avant-garde, whatever. And people would call in to discuss the song and tell me whether they liked it or not. And given the nature of my personality at that point, if they didn't like it, I would basically tear them apart on air. But this is how I was able to play stuff like Abysmal Torment from Malta or Alamalman Vasarat from Helsinki. All these weird bands, some of them brutal, some of them just weird. And eventually, the new program manager they hired decided that that wasn't the demographic they wanted to attract and let us all go.
Yeah.
And once that happened, it was really hard to find anything in the South that I wanted to do. I sold rugs for a long time, but I was working like 101 hours a week. And
who wants to do that?
No one. I know more about rugs than I ever should. And I had a girl that I was kind of interested in at one point, said that she was coming out to South Carolina to meet her boyfriend, and they were going to drive back to Utah. So I said, all right, well, screw it. Why don't I just sell the few things I have and I'll come with you.
So you didn't even visit Utah.
No,
I didn't even visit. You just came out here and I mean, you didn't grow up in the typical Utah culture or anything. You just,
It was quite a culture
And
shock.
how long ago was this now that you came here?
Oh, man. 5 years?
5 years ago. So you've been here for a little while.
A little bit. I mean, it was a huge culture shock coming here from South Carolina. South Carolina is literally the worst place you can live. You know, I'm using the word literally wrong there and being a little overdramatic. South Carolina is a terrible place to live. It was a subculture of violence and racial pecking order that I wanted nothing to do with, but couldn't escape. It was growing up as a kid. I had friends die. I was shot at 13.
You were
Yeah,
personally.
I was, and because I was the wrong skin color where I was. And a lot of hate for it. And growing up and becoming an adult, what happened was my sense of humor was black and dark and terrible. And that's appropriate in South Carolina because honestly, there's a lot of hate in
South Carolina.
In the South Carolina. So people who are laughing at your terrible jokes, your racial jokes, your violent jokes, it's all because secretly they're kind of feeling it on the inside. And so coming out here to Utah, I learned quickly that that wasn't really appropriate. And a lot of what I felt, that combination of like rancor and sometimes fear was all let go.
Yeah.
I mean, when I first came here, I moved to Roy. And
Oh, wow. So you were out there.
yeah. And when I was at Roy, I went to the Walmart and I just sat there and stared at people walking into the Walmart, walking out of it and just going in it. I had just left 2 weeks prior to being at a North Charleston Walmart where someone ran up and was screaming at a red box for having their movie late and shot it to pieces because they thought that would stop their late fees.
Like shot it with a gun?
Yes.
Wow.
And I mean, this is a place where all the gas stations after 7 p.m. shut down are behind bulletproof glass. So
Utah was a bit of a culture shock.
yes,
Especially Roy, Utah. I mean, that's that's its own interesting place.
Yeah,
I actually spent a little bit of time myself up that way.
I said I found the wardrobe because I came to like the white people Narnia. That's
Yeah.
the only thing I could think of comparing Utah to when I was telling people back home. I was like, you really have to come to Utah. And people were like, God, you like Utah? I was like, you have no idea how amazing this place is. Like, people leave their doors unlocked. Like, I've never heard of such a thing.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I'll walk out to my car. I mean, even in Salt Lake, I'll walk out to my car in the morning, forget to
Yeah.
lock my doors. And it's like, okay, well, my stereo's still in there. You go any other state, any other city, your whole car would be stripped to shreds.
Well, I've been in some bad places. I've been in the bad parts of Texas. I've been in St. Louis. You know, I've been...
So you've seen the world a little.
Well, I should say that I've seen the ghettos of the country. I mean,
You pride yourself. Well, have you been over to Rose Park, right? Or no?
Yeah. Well, I mean,
that's about as ghetto as we get here in Utah.
No, well, I mean, I've been to Ogden a couple of times.
Yeah, Ogden's got some rough areas.
And anytime I ever felt like I was in danger, I just yelled out whoop whoop, and then everyone scattered and left me alone. So that worked out. No, I moved here to Roy and got a job over at Convergys, which I'm sure everyone has at one point.
I've worked at Convergys
Yeah.
many years ago.
Yeah, it was a thing. So I did that, and eventually I met my ex, and she lived in Murray. So I ended up trying to transfer my job, didn't work out, and I got the job at Blockbuster, then found Geeks Who Drink. But
Is there even a Blockbuster around anymore? I mean, do people rent movies anymore?
Blockbuster is done.
Yeah.
They're officially done. When I was with them, they were on their last legs. And Blockbuster had a lot of chances. They could have bought Redbox at one point, and they just made a lot of stupid businesses.
Well, yeah, I guess people rent movies Redbox. I mean, that's how you do it these days.
Man, they could have bought. I don't think it was Netflix that could have bought. I think it was just Redbox, but they made a lot of silly decisions.
Yeah.
And I think there is like maybe one or two stores around here, but they're all in the process of closing and selling off their
Dude, I
inventory.
remember growing up as a kid and going to the video store to rent a movie on a Friday night and just, what movie should we get? I mean, this was back in the VHS days, you know, and,
Yeah.
and it was just such an exciting thing, you know, to go rent a movie.
I remember trying to shoplift the VHSs when they were still on the floor of rare foreign movies and Japanimation films when I was like in elementary, middle school.
Yeah.
Because there was no way I would be allowed to rent them. And I wanted to see them, and I would just get too scared and always put them back before I left the store with it. I'd just be like, no, I can't let him see me sneaking off with Ninja Scroll or whatever it was I tried to put in my pants.
Do you see? I lived down in Utah County for a while as well when I first moved to Utah myself, and I actually worked. I was an assistant manager at one of the video stores down there. Yep. And you would not believe the amount of we call it Utah porn, that it would basically just show boobs or something like the amount of, mid 20-year-old guys that would try, they'd be too embarrassed to rent it. So they would try to shoplift it.
Yeah. Knowing that Utah's the number one purchaser of porn in the entire country.
It was ridiculous. Your story just reminded me of
absolutely.
That, just cause it was like, oh, I don't want them to see me rent, babes and machine guns or something like that, but.
And that was what was funny about working at the Blockbuster in Murray is,
well, you knew what kind of porn I was talking about.
Yeah,
it
absolutely.
It was rated R
like
porn.
Boogie Nights or something.
Yeah, it was like, I had a lot of tits in that one. So,
Heather Graham with all her plot. That was great. No, it was one of the weird things is because at this Blockbuster store, I had an excellent manager named Dan McLean who's since moved to Seattle, who was one of my greatest pub quiz purveyors. But I had some coworkers that grew up like strict Mormon and were not allowed to watch a lot of these different things. So when people would come up and ask me movie recommendations, I knew all the movies in the store because I had watched them, and I had watched the really messed up ones like The Piano Teacher or Mysterious Skin or Funny Games or something. Like, those are not the most extreme movies out there. We obviously didn't have stuff like Sallow or Flower of Flesh and Blood and, Philosophy of a Knife in the middle of Blockbuster. But people would come up and be like, what movies do you recommend? I'll just rent whatever you want. I just want to see something that's completely out of the ordinary.
So people would come up to you knowing that you would give a good recommendation.
Yeah. And because that was a big thing, whenever Dan went to hire me, he was like, well, why don't you sell me on these two different movies? And he grabbed two movies, and I just went off on my trivia knowledge of the film and started explaining all the different things about the cinematography. And I can't even remember what movie it was now that I think about it, but I do specifically remembering talking about the various actors and the works they've been in before and how this was a departure and whatnot. And that honestly wasn't a big thing for a lot of people. If it was above PG or PG-13 for some of my coworkers, they didn't know about it and they didn't want to watch it.
Before we get too off, before I completely forget, I want to talk about roller derby.
Yeah.
You're one of the senior roller derby announcers. You've been doing that for a little while, or what? What's the story behind that?
So when I decided I was going to move out to Utah on a whim, the first thing I wanted to do when I got here is I wanted to get back into local music. And I always loved doing like death metal, slam, grindcore, stuff like, you had a past guy on here, LD.
Yeah.
Who's in all local black metal bands, pretty much all of them. And,
anything good.
Anything good.
Anything worth listening to.
Alexander Jorgensen and Helen Cox and the rest of those guys are all in excellent bands. So I'm definitely not diminishing any of their contributions to the local scene, but I really wanted to get into local music. I wanted to do death metal, grindcore, slam, whatever. And what I was doing at the time is MySpace was still a thing before that imploded.
It's still a thing, man.
I guess now that Justin Timberlake bought it, right? Anyway, so I would look at all of the band pages, and there was one person that was like on all of the band pages' top friends, and that was Brouhaha, who's the president of the Salt City Derby Girls, and she was doing I guess like a booking company at that time called like Ensign.
Okay.
And helping book local shows. So I messaged her on Facebook and I'm like, hey, I'm moving out to the area and I was interested in doing local music. And I was wondering if you could, tell me some places to go to see local shows or recommend things to me. And she actually responded to me.
Which you probably weren't even expecting a response.
I really wasn't. I was very much shotgunning it. But she responded to me and said, well, she gave me the information I was looking for. You should also come check out roller derby. That's something else I do. Rebecca is a consummate businesswoman and is always doing lots of self-promotion and crossovers. So you should come out and see roller derby. It's because she was president of the league. And I said, all right, I'll definitely come check that out. And I moved out here and I took a girl named Stephanie, who I'm good friends with now. It was our first date to a roller derby match, and she hated it, and I loved it. And I met Brew afterwards, and I was like, yeah, I really like this. And I started going and watching roller derby more. And at that time, they had their own announcers, and eventually, I expressed my interest in doing announcing. Said announcers gave me my chance to do announcing on the mic, and saw that I was decent at it. So when Brew decided to let go her other announcers, they asked if I'd be willing to announce for it, and that's how I started announcing for Salt City.
And so it's been a few years that you've been doing that as well.
Yeah, so I announced for Salt City when they were flat track, and then I announced for them when they became bank track, and they're the only bank track league in the state. And then last year, I did not call for their season. They decided to let me go from my contract early. I had a contract with them that I would only call for Salt Lake in the state. Okay. I could travel and call for other leagues. I actually travel and call for Magic City, Hell's Bells. I've gone to North Dakota, Montana, Idaho, lots of places here on the West Coast, and call for teams. They'll pay for me to go out there, and then I'll announce.
Wow! So between that and Geeks Who Drink, man, you're all over the place. You keep yourself pretty busy.
It's actually really funny because my first time going to Spudtown, which is hosted by the amazing Candyman up there with Treasure Valley, during a break in the action when I wasn't announcing, I walked over to a nearby pub called the Piper Pub, which my friend John Pio and I went up and talked to a bartender that was there and sold him on Geeks Who Drink. And that was years ago, and they're still doing Geeks Who Drink there.
Wow, so that's pretty cool.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's something that I love doing, that even when traveling for roller derby, we were trying to sell venues, and it's a ton of fun. I love roller derby. I haven't called for any local teams probably about a year now, but I've been looking forward to potentially calling for Ladies of the Lake, which is a new league that's starting up that is made up of former members of Salt City and some other local leagues. Wasatch has an amazing announcer in Fragglepuss, which I mentioned earlier. I think John Maserati is also another individual with them. I honestly couldn't tell you a lot of the other announcers for the other leagues, like Junction City and Happy Valley, Red Rockets, which I think are just part of Wasatch anyway. But yeah, roller derby announcing is a huge thing for me, and I really love the local scene. And I'm looking back at it becoming a scene and a community more than a competition, which is what it's been for a while.
As you know, I've never been out to any of the roller derby things, and I've always wanted to go check it out. And
I gotta crack open another one of these reds. I'm sorry.
No, you're fine. You're fine. So I always, I bring people on, and, I'm always curious, especially, since you've moved here, since we vaguely touched on the culture shock. Mm-hmm. What do you like about living in Salt Lake? I mean, you obviously like living here. You moved here. You're not your typical, you didn't grow up here. You're like you said, you're 28, right?
Yeah.
Most teenagers, they can't wait to get out of Utah. They think, Utah's horrible. What do you like about living here?
Honestly, the issues that I had growing up in South Carolina don't exist in Utah. They simply don't have.
And what issues were these? Like the racial issues?
Yeah,
and stuff like that.
I mean, even the violence. Like the number one crime in Utah is white collar, because folks are hiding their money from the church so they don't have to tithe.
Well, yeah, there's a lot of fraud and
exactly,
and a lot of
and the number one crime
scams
in like South Carolina is like domestic abuse and murder. It's just something that I've never.
So it's a little more relaxing here for that.
Absolutely. I'm not scared of anything
to walk around the streets.
No,
at night.
Absolutely not. And I can't say the same about South Carolina.
There were parts where you were like, I sure as hell I'm not going to go there at night.
Oh no. I mean, and not only that, but if you did want to go there at night, there were sometimes things that you had to do that you didn't want to do. And
like kill somebody.
It was never. It was never.
I gotta go there and kill somebody.
Yeah, I know. It's never that extreme, but there were situations that I was presented with that I was fairly uncomfortable. And
do you care to share any of that?
Well,
or are you uncomfortable?
No. I'm trying to think of one that's
no, just make something up, man.
No.
Just come on.
That's one thing is that my life has been fairly interesting enough that people accuse me of making stuff up whenever
they're like, there's no way in hell that's real.
Well, no. Like, for example, when I was in high school, I got a fake ID, but not so I could go drink, but so that I could go DJ and play music at clubs. And that's how I found out that my high school biology teacher was a stripper. Was meeting her.
Was she hot?
Oh yeah, she totally was.
You're like, hey guys, you got to come check out her.
No, I did not do that because that could have led to a lot of bad things.
What was her stripper name?
Aquafina.
Oh, Aquafina.
Because everyone needs water.
It's very I like it.
Yeah. Good Lord. But we're gonna gloss over that one. No, I remember one time leaving the Music Farm, which was on 32 Am Street in downtown Charleston, which is where I saw a lot of bands. There was a guy who was delivering pizza, and he had a scooter, like a college Charleston kid, and there was a local wood-burning pizza around the corner. And this homeless guy came out from one of the nearby alleyways and was like, yo, man, I'm so hungry, man. Can I get a slice? And he was just like, fuck you, bum, and threw his water bottle at him. This was a kid that thought he was invincible and didn't realize that it's not about where you're from, it's about where you're at. And he was in the middle of King Street in downtown Charleston, cursing at a guy and throwing stuff at him, which is not the correct answer. It never is the correct answer. And to further cement that fact, a massive group, like Walking Dead style homeless, come out of the alleyway and proceed to kick the shit out of this guy. And pick up his scooter and drop it on top of him and take the pizza, and they're all passing around and eating the pizza, and they're basically giving the guy New York CPR right there on the street, which I talk about stomping his chest with their feet. Wow. This is something that I'm witnessing, and they're sitting there eating the pizza. A guy that he originally threw the bottle out pours it out over his head, and I'm just in abject horror looking at this. And I'm staring at it.
And you're not worried that they're going to come and jump you.
I am worried about it, but I'm frozen solid at this point. And they turn, because I've never seen anything like that. I've never actually seen a lynching before. Like, by this time, I had already had my back tooth molar cracked from a sucker punch in the middle of middle school. I've been shot. I was nearly blown up with a nail bomb. Just all sorts of insanity had already happened to me.
Yeah.
But this was still a new thing for me. You get used to the horribleness, but when new horribleness arises, it's still a little bit of a sanity loss. Take it back to geeky stuff, Call of Cthulhu, moving on. So I watched this and they all turn and look at me. And at least that's how I feel, and that's how I remember it. They're looking at me. And I simply just walked away and didn't say anything. And years later, I came back to King Street after a date. I was on a date with a girl walking down, and there was a homeless guy. And I was like, yeah, man, I'm really hungry and whatnot. Can you help me out? And it was the same guy. And this was a couple of years later. I look over and I was like, I remember you. You were the guys that had your way with that pizza delivery guy. And he looks at, and he just like rubs his nose. He's like, nah, man, that wasn't me. And I was like, it's perfectly fine. I never said anything. And I was like, I'll be glad to get you something to eat because that guy was an asshole.
Yeah.
And he's like, all right, cool. So I took him to a local pita shop, bought him some food. And when he was there, he's like, yeah, man, you've been real nice, man. That was cool. Not say anything. So right now, man, don't buy any of the Coke down here. Don't buy that Coke because it's been cut with some stuff. And people ain't getting back up from it. You know what I'm saying? And just
was nice of him to give you a little heads up on
and
that.
he was like, yo, you need to stay away from these streets right now because that's where they getting the tourists and whatnot. So it was very much this subculture where by not being a law-abiding citizen and not punishing, not actively going out of your way to make sure rights were wronged, that you were rewarded for it.
Yeah.
And it's something that I'm sure exists everywhere, but in South Carolina, that's just the one story that until here. I'm sure I could fill up 3 hours of podcasts with stuff that happened there.
Well, and maybe down the road I'll bring you, back on. We'll
if
have
people
to.
can stand me, yeah.
No, you got some great stories,
oh man.
And I'll definitely have to come out to one of your Geeks Who Drink nights.
And that's called networking, children.
Yeah, networking. Let's go down the list before we close out here and everything. How can people get in touch with you? How can people get in touch with Geeks Who Drink, roller derby, whatever? I mean, what are some good contact information to kind of stay in the loop?
Well, we do have a Geeks Who Drink Facebook page where we're very active. It's simply Geeks Who Drink Pub Quizzes. Honestly, head over to geekswhodrink.com because we have all the blogs from all the quizzes we do around the country. We have a ton of different sections on there for signing up for the email sign list where we don't sell your email address or anything like that. And you can always find out about the next events. Right now, we're heavily promoting the fact that we're going to do our next iteration of Geek Bowl over in Austin, Texas. It's going to be a national competition, giving away about $10,000 worth of prizes. And we're actually going to have it at Austin City Live. And it's going to be in the middle of that hotel. It's going to be amazing.
You're going to go down to that?
Oh yeah, I go down to that every year since I've been with the company. It's a big national event, and it's some of us treat it like spring break, and it's completely debaucherous, and it is fun to get annihilated with quizzers from around the country, sometimes out of country as far as Canada is concerned, because we had a team from Canada last year. But I also get to meet a lot of QMs that I work with on a daily basis through email and the internet, and now we're all in one place. And so we're all like-minded. We have fun. We drink. We party. We spite fuck our coworkers if we hate them. But all sorts of other things like that. No one does that except me. I apologize. But no, it's a big national event. It's a lot of fun. You can head, like I said, geekswhodrink.com. As far as getting in touch with me, if you just this is going to sound super egotistical, but if you just Google Jesse Brake, no one else has my stupid name. You'll find me. But you can go to hellobobafett@gmail.com. Boba, Fat, F-A-T-T, just like the Star Wars character. That's my derby name, actually, is Boba Fett, which means Boba.
And I'll try to get all the links up with the show notes and stuff as well. Just because, basically the idea of even doing this podcast is just, I mean, even like yourself, I would have never even had an opportunity to get to know you, get to know your story. And there's a lot of people, I like to find out people's stories, and then we all can network and, like you said, and get to know each other. I mean, Salt Lake's a small city, man. It
is. And the one thing that we didn't really touch on that I wanted to mention more about Salt Lake.
Yeah, anything more you want to mention about Salt Lake?
Well, you had mentioned about my favorite parts about Salt Lake.
Yeah, your favorite parts?
There is a lot of culture here, but it is very homogenized as well. A lot of things that you get here have been toned down. And part of the pub quiz, and especially the way I host it, anyone who's ever been to my pub quiz, I unfortunately sometimes am very offensive. As far as my comedy is concerned, and my history with hecklers has been the way, like, people who enforce the Digital Millennium Copyright Act have been, is that I cut hecklers' heads off and stick them on a spike so that my quizzers remember 3 years down the road, don't heckle Jesse. Because I'm vicious, and that comes back from doing the insult comedy back in South Carolina. And part of it with Geeks Who Drink is pushing those boundaries, as far as not only just being sardonic, and it's also seeing what it is that we can do to contribute to the local culture. What aspects of it can we make more lively? Like, when I order a sandwich here at, like, some random burger company, it's like, oh, this is going to be the super hot habanero burger and whatnot. Well, no, not in Salt Lake. It's not going to be the super hot habanero burger. I'm going to have had hotter water than this burger, unless you're going to a place like Kobe Sushi with the Hellfire, or, random places of curry. And I think part of that also translates to entertainment, is that they say it's spicy, they say it's pushing the envelope, and it's not. And that's
do you think people can do that more here in Salt Lake? You think they need to push the envelope a little bit more?
I think as far as pushing the envelope, I think people have been scared to. I think that people sometimes run their comedy or their entertainment like LDS Family Home Evening. And that's not what it is. I say the F word. And if you get out of line, I will rip into you. And I don't do it to be cruel. If someone keeps interrupting me during the quiz or something like that, or someone heckles me, then it gets bad. And I think that every time I've done that, I've never had a crowd not on my side. People have been blown away by the stuff that's been said. But I think people are looking for that sort of outlet sometimes.
Yeah.
The fact that, some open mic nights, you can't curse around here. Like, are you kidding me? That means I can never do stand-up in Salt Lake if I can't curse. I just can't do it. I understand that some people don't find, like, racial jokes funny, which I would never do at, Geeks Who Drink. Some people don't find rape jokes funny, which I would never do at Geeks Who Drink. But there are certain aspects of making fun of certain things, and making fun of Democrats, Republicans. No one's safe. We lampoon everything. And I think that people enjoy that aspect of the pub quiz. It's not just about trivia. It's about entertainment and making it more than just what's homogenized and passes off here in the Valley.
You got a heck of a story, man. Thank you so much. I mean, seriously, thank you so much for anything else you want to add before we close out here? Anything else you want to mention or talk about? Or
just head over to geekswhodrink.com. You'll see a listing of all the places that we host pub quiz. If you don't like the idea of someone who's offensive and pushes the envelope like me, there are people who don't. Like Nick Johnson. Nick Johnson's an excellent host. We just have two different styles. I have a girl, Sarah, that I've trained that hosts over at Lumpy's Downtown, the hookah bar. She's excellent. She doesn't push it like I do.
But some people probably come to you because they know,
exactly.
Hey, Jesse's going to push it tonight.
Yeah. There are people that specifically come to pub quiz because they like the way that I host it. So the fact is that there is a host out there for you to have the night that you want to have, and for you to have the type of host whose individual style is going to be tailored to you. So come out to Geeks Who Drink. Even if you find me despicable and weird and offensive for no reason, there's definitely a pub quiz out here in the Valley for you.
All right, that's going to do it for another episode of the I Am Salt Lake podcast, episode 123. The show notes are on the website at iamsaltlake.com. Feel free to drop Jesse a line, get in touch with him if you want to go check out one of the Geeks Who Drink nights, pub quiz nights. There's a lot still going on in this city, even though it's wintertime and we tend to hibernate. A lot of really great bands coming to town, a lot of really great shows going on, and get out and discover new things in the city. A lot going on in Salt Lake City. Give me a follow on Twitter at I Am Salt Lake. Try to keep you guys up to date on things going on in and around Salt Lake City. And remember, we're almost Christmas time, so hopefully you guys have gotten your gifts done. If not, there's a lot of really great local businesses that could use your support this time of year. I'm here once a week. New shows come out on Mondays, so make sure to subscribe in iTunes. And like I mentioned in the beginning, my name is Chris Hollifield, and thank you so much for checking out the I Am Salt Lake podcast.